Well, over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with all kinds of related professionals in neuroscience, developmental pediatricians, neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists. And what I find is that when one comes from a particular orientation or a particular training background, they tend to see everything through their lens. Um, if you go to a neurologist or pediatrician with a student child that demonstrates problems with attention and distractibility, hyperactivity, um, ADHD, boom, just flies off the checklist as the problem right away. Um, if in the last 10 years, it's become a little more chic to call it an executive function disorder than simply calling it ADHD. Um, but thinking of just attention without really understanding what may be contributing to those behaviors, which are really, in many cases, symptoms, not problems, is just not a very comprehensive way to address the issue. Now, the same could be said for emotional dysregulation. So many kids have been seeing therapists for sometimes months, sometimes years, with little gains. Anxiety, fear, obsessive compulsive traits, mood dysregulation, depression. And they keep treating these kids with more and more therapy and, in many cases, more and more meds. You can't really medicate a kid into compliance without dealing with the whole child. Now, what both those who see ADHD as the problem and those who see anxiety as the problem fail to address is what cognitive systems may be lacking that makes that child unable to manage the demands put on them from day to day. If someone has to go to work each day and they don't have the skill sets to manage their job, they either get fired or they eventually quit. But they don't have to keep going back into that arena every day without the adequate skill requirements or skill sets to manage what's asked of them. Now, what you really have to do when you look at a child is you have to think of the child from the big picture, from all areas. Now, there's truly three brains that have to be interacting in order to have a successful integration with life's demands. Truly do have to have a good frontal cortex executive function center. So that could be thought of as one circle in a Venn diagram. Those things that are orchestrated by the frontal cortex. Now, we all also have a deeper level set of cognitive, I guess you could say, cognitive hardware that's called the limbic system. That's the fear center, the amygdala, the caudate, the cingulate, the hippocampus. These are our fight or flight centers. These are the centers responsible for managing emotional regulation. Now, not all of us come into the game with the same ability to manage stress. Some people are much more equipped based on their cognitive hardware or their, I guess you could say, neuroanatomical brain design, and some people aren't as equipped. But both attention and emotional regulation are highly linked to the ability to manage the tasks presented to the child from moment to moment. So having the cognitive hardware, the rest of the brain behind the frontal cortex and around the limbic system, takes all the information coming in and is supposed to bundle it and package it and make it available to the front of the brain to manage one's life. Now, these cognitive abilities have historically been termed processing skills. So when kids are struggling in school, often a teacher will say, oh, the child has a processing problem. Now, the word processing problem is like saying the child is not well. There could be a million reasons you're not well. Now, neuroscience has put labels on so many different types of processing problems: long-term memory and short-term memory and immediate memory and visual sequencing and visual closure and processing speed and language skill development and so on and so on. There's just so many ways to think of all of the different cognitive, I guess you could say, tools in the toolbox that are needed to manage life's demands. But fortunately, there has been some consensus among neuroscientists about how to compartmentalize or how to develop a conceptual model of the skills or the abilities necessary to manage reading, writing, math, general knowledge, social skills, listening skills. There's a bunch of stuff that has to be working. Now, we've developed a conceptual model based on research from some of the top cognitive theorists. I'd like to say I could take credit for this, but it was not my creation. It may have been modified to some degree by our history of working with kids. But if you want to really think about how the brain works, you have to think of different systems that must work in isolation and then in tight integration with other systems. And what I propose is I'll just make the presentation in this video of what are these systems, these cognitive systems that must be intact and must be working at a level commensurate with one's brain's potential in order to manage life's demands.